Greetings from the cosmic horrors. The stars are right once again, and the great old ones will allow us to talk about for 30 minutes H.P. Lovecraft, the horror writer who is a genre unto himself. I'm your cosmic host, Mark Griffin, executive of Lovecraft Estate on Yaga, joined in by two from the material world, David Guffey, a professor at Mispatock University, and Richard Wilson, who writes Lovecraftian book reviews on Amazon. At this time in his life, Lovecraft had been pulled from school and was reading adventure and detective stories. One of these writers is George Alfred Henty, an English novelist and war correspondent. Henty wrote historical adventures for young people that were popular in the late 19th century because of their fast-paced plots. A few of these titles were Dragon and the Raven, and For the Temple, and Under Drake's Flag, and In Freedom's Cause. The idea of the stories came from tales he told his children. Their names even appeared as main characters in Out of the Pampas. Henty's central characters were nearly always poor at the onset, and often they were the sons of recently widowed mothers. Robert A. Huddleback wrote in his critique on the author's stories, but Henty rarely held a boy's poverty against him. But most of Henty's good fellows were either the lost and unsuspecting sons of noblemen, or were of aristocratic but recently impoverished lines. Given Lovecraft's lost privileged childhood, I could see the attraction of these stories. It's amazing that this author is considered a children's writer, according to one review on Amazon. In Henty's day, this might have been true, but most authors I know over 30 would have trouble reading at this level. It's not clear what impact Henty had on Lovecraft. He mentions the author only sparingly in a letter to Vernon Shea. Possibly one story Lovecraft may have read was True to the Old Flag, the tale of the American War of Independence, which tells the story of the American Revolution from the point of view of the Loyalists. An Amazon review stated, "My complaint there is that these characters are quite one-dimensional. He describes many of the major battles of the war, making it clear that the Americans only won because of the incredible incompetency of the English generals. But as the main characters are mere backgrounds to these events. Just as Lovecraft may have read these books when he was being homeschooled, Henty's books are popular with homeschoolers today. George Alfred Henty has an exceptional historical fictional storyteller, according to one modern-day homeschool student. His stories were always strong about hard-working, trustworthy, and loyal young men, mostly coming from the English perspective. Henty's writing really springs alive," the reader continued, "and encourage you to turn the next page. There are several reasons for this quickness and cleverness in writing. And first of all, the reason is that Henty had real-life experience in war. The second reason is that Henty had a strong belief in doing what was right and courageous, and believed in helping those in need, standing up for women. Thirdly, Henty was a strong patriot, and in his books he condemns a traitor and exalts those that remain firm to their country. All these great aspects can be seen throughout his novels, and that is what makes his books such a pleasure to read." Henty's books show up on the homeschooling reading list thanks to Art Robinson, currently a Republican senator from Oregon. When he homeschooled his 6 children, they read Henty's books, and Robinson later created a homeschooling curriculum that included a reading list of these books. Since all of his children claim to have PhDs, this curriculum has credence with homeschoolers. Even during his lifetime, Henty did have his critics, who accused him of imperialism. Today, his books have been deemed as xenophobic. Art Robinson even received criticism for Henty's reading list when he ran for candidate of Congress in 2011, being called a lover of racist novels. A prime example of this racism is by Sheer Pluck, a tale of the Ashanti War, not Ashanti the American singer, but the African country now known as Ghana. Within the pages of an infamous line, "The intelligence of the average Negro is about as equal to that of a European child of 10 years old. Very few go beyond this, but these are exceptions, just as Shakespeare was an exception to the ordinary intelligence of an Englishman." Another example is True to the Old Flag, which portrays Native Americans as savages throughout. And one arrogant Amazon reviewer wrote, presumably a white male, "One word of warning to the ever so sensitive. Henty was writing in the 19th century. So if you get upset with less than flattering portrayals of American Indians and blacks, do us all a favor and pass up this book and move on to Da Vinci Code or George R.R. Martin's Lastus Excretion. But if you're a big boy, then give Henty's work a try. You'll enjoy it." Many of Henty's defenders simply downplay the racism in his reading material. One defender of Art Robinson's reading list, conservative talk show radio commentator Barry Farber, downplayed by Sheer Pluck to such an extent that one wonders even read the story, such as claiming erroneously that the main character is black. The impact of Henty's stories on Lovecraft's own xenophobia isn't clear. More than likely, it reinforced beliefs already instilled in him. But these are not stories that left a lifelong influence on him directly. None of Lovecraft's stories have ever been called Henty inspired. Lovecraft himself lumped all of his books as customary juvenilia. Okay, David and Richard, the Lovecraftian word of the month is a word that's highly associated with the author. It is Eldritch. Do you know what that word means?
Oh, Eldritch?
Eldritch. Eldritch.
Oh, okay.
Eldritch.
I meant to be kind of mystical and otherworldly. I guess if you're shooting for, a quick definition.
You have any guesses, David?
It also, I think, to me, would have the connotation of some sort of negative or evil portion of it. So eldritch energy, whatever, eldritch magic sounds like, oh, maybe that's a little evil.
Yeah, the technical definition is weird and sinister or ghostly. So you are not too far off the mark.
Yeah.
The word is about 500 years old. It's believed to have come from Middle English elf-rich, meaning fairyland or literally elf kingdom. Robert Louis Stevenson used Eldritch in his novel Kidnapped, where a woman's curse is described as a kind of Eldritch sing-song. According to someone who calls himself Roof, who compiled a list of Lovecraft's favorite words, Eldritch shows up 23 times in his fiction, such as in the case of Charles Dexter Ward. I never heard this before, but some people refer to cosmic horror as Eldritch abomination. And I've never heard anybody refer to it that way. And of course, there's the famous Eldritch horror tabletop game that's inspired by the works of Lovecraft that came out in 2013. It's a game we've attempted to play several times, but because the COVID era has been going on, we can't socially distance from that.
That pandemic.
Yes, that pandemic is just ruining all the fun in this world.
Well, I want to say I'm fully vaccinated now, so I guess I'm not going to be contagious. I hope.
What about you, Richard? Are you fully?
Yes, as of last month, yeah, I'm fully vaccinated at this point as well.
Well, the vaccine hasn't reached y'all yet, so I'm still waiting on it to come up here. The probes and satellites just haven't come here yet.
They haven't made it that far out there with the vaccine.
It's quite a distance, but it's able to. They don't have to worry about refrigeration. It stays pretty cold in the dark void of space.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, you'll be able to handle the sub-zero temperatures needed to store the vaccine.
Yeah, it's doing quite well.
True.
Yeah. All right. And next subject. The elder god of this month is Sotogiwa. At least that's how I think it's pronounced. There was a video online. Close. I'm sorry, what?
It sounds pretty close.
Yeah, I found a video of him about him, and the speaker, who sounded very authoritative, it kept pronouncing it that way. He could have been drunk, but he sounded what he was talking about. And of course,
I always thought it was Sotogiwa. Is that what you said?
I say Sotogiwa, but Sotogiwa does sound a little more.
And he's the one that's like a big fat toad sort of thing.
Yeah, the embodiment of sloth, as far as it seemed like when I was kind of reading the descriptions and that type of thing of him.
Yeah. There's a description of him in one of the stories. He was a very squat and pot-bellied. His head was more like a monstrous toad than a deity. His whole body was covered with the imitation of short fur, giving somehow the vague sensation of both a bat and sloth. His sleepy lids were half lowered over his globular eyes, and the tip of a queer tongue issued from his mouth. And he was originally created by Clark Ashton Smith. And his first actual appearance was Tales of Santempra Zyros, which was written back in 1929, but wasn't published until 1931 in Weird Tales. He first appeared in print, however, in Lovecraft's and Whisper in Darkness, which came out a few months earlier. So a lot of people got introduced to him through Lovecraft and actually through Smith's own story. The Toad God makes a reappearance in Clark Ashton Smith's Seven Geeses, and Lovecraft continued to mention him throughout his stories, such as At the Mountains of Madness and Horror at the Museum, describing him as a toad-like gargoyle. So how you say it, David? Sotogiwa?
Sotogiwa. But the H probably is silent.
As opposed to a hard T.
Yeah, it's probably a...
Yes.
But it's probably silent. Satagua. So I don't know.
Satagua. Well, I'll try to pronounce it that way. For those who are curious, it's Sathoggua. And this creature shows up in a Conan adventure by Robert E. Howard. At least some people say it wasn't because he got killed too easily in there, and think it may just been a spawn of his or something. And an idol of him appears in another Conan adventure, one that was written by L. Frank DeCamp and Lynn Carter. And this one came to life. And he shows up in the Illuminatus trilogy and by Robert Shea and Robert Anton Wilson, who also call him Saint Toad. And that was the name of a church that Lovecraft had in the Fungi from Yuggoth poem. And it isn't clear if it's supposed to be Satogua, sorry. But we all take it to be that way. And there's also a short story by Michael Sheen. And then there's Gray Magic by Gary Myers, who based a lot of the story on themes from Karkash and Smith. And in 1967, Colin Wilson had a novel called Mind Parasites. And their characters in that story were called Satoguas. And I probably need your help on this next one here. He's also described, according to Wikipedia, as a summable unit in a 2016 Japanese mobile game, Tokyo After School Summoners, where he's depicted as a proud shut-in NEET dwelling in the VIP room of an underground casino in Ropeijo, Tokyo. Since I don't play video games that much, can you decipher exactly what that meant?
Having not played that, no, I can't say I'm superficially familiar with that.
Yeah.
You said he was downloadable content on a mobile game?
He was a summable unit in a 2016 Japanese mobile game called Tokyo After School Summoners, where he's depicted as a proud shut-in NEET, and NEET. And I did look up NEET, and it stands for Not Educational, Employment, or Training, meaning a person is basically an unemployed slacker here in the United States who stays online all the time.
Okay.
It's used to describe manga and anime fans.
You further go along with his embodiment of sloth, I guess.
Yeah.
Hey, I like this guy. I'm thinking.
Yeah.
You get along with the Big Lebowski.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Sathagua abides.
Yeah, he's a laid back, kinder, gentler elder god.
Yeah. I looked him up on the Tokyo After School Summoners, and he looks nothing like a toad. He resembles more like a bluish gray bear with 2 rows of ears, and possessing the physique of almost like a former college football player who's slowly letting himself go. And he wears street clothes, usually a t-shirt and khaki shorts that emphasize his package. One cannot describe him as being adorably cute, but he is definitely not terrifying. He looks like somebody Seth Rogen would have a bromance with.
Okay.
There were some changes in the.
Yeah, they definitely. A lot of.
I think they lost the spirit of that one. I think they gave up the spirit of that.
They took some liberties.
Of course, maybe it makes sense you play the game. Maybe you understand and go, oh, I get it now. But since I've not played the game, I don't know.
I'm not going to go in for that. I don't know. The Japanese game sounds. I don't know. Who knows if they're. Can we even get those here? Can we download it on Android?
Yeah, you can.
I'm sure you can, but you may get like a some sort of malware on there. And going back, Lovecraft often addressed Smith as the disciple of Satogua, the chosen of Satogua, the definitive representative of Satogua, and even the high priest of Satogua.
Lovecraft to be complimentary.
Yeah, they're meant to be compliments. They were just they're kind of a ways to address him. It's like because he really fell in love with this character. He was enchanted by him when he read the manuscript before it was ever published for Tales of Tempra Zyros. And he said, as for me, Satogua made such an impression on my fancy that I'm using it in a revision job I am now doing, telling us some things connected with his worship before he appeared on Earth's surface. This story was the Mound. Lovecraft even devised a family tree, making Cthulhu and Satogua first cousins. However, Clark Asher Smith revised the family tree mainly to correct Lovecraft's assumptions in the Mound, and he has Cthulhu becoming Satogua's uncle. So he changed a little bit on the family tree there. Yeah. So that's the whole ball and wax on Sotogiwa.
Nice.
Yes. So everything you wanted to know about him. Yes. And okay. And I thought we'd go back to Keen's question from last episode, since we didn't really truly answer it satisfactory. And he went, hello. I was recently made aware that the Church of Subgenius recognizes Cthulhu as a god. Do you think Cthulhu embodies typical subgenius characteristics, specifically Slack? And what do you think Lovecraft would have thought of this recognition? And you care to answer that, Richard?
I think most of what I've read about it as far as Slack for the subgenius was that it was undefinable. And then I guess as far as particularly the era that it came out of in the 70s, as far as being kind of more like the embodiment of counterculture cool and being outside the system and that type of thing. That type of verse. And I don't really feel like Cthulhu would really care about that kind of thing in terms of caring whether he possessed Slack or not, or felt that other people thought that he did. I did read something interesting as far as that they had the flying spaghetti monster from the Pastafarians presumably is actually Cthulhu, and they've simply misidentified him, and they're worshiping the wrong deity essentially. And have misidentified Cthulhu as the flying spaghetti monster, and the noodles and that type of thing are actually his tentacles, which I thought was an interesting little lineup there as far as the truth behind a particular deity is concerned.
Somebody that would almost like split a church over something like that,
Yeah, let's say it'd be considered blasphemy.
Yeah, they'd be like going, no, he was no pasta, and other ones feeling like that they are like finally received the truth, we've been deceived all this time, and so that they somebody can cause a split. I've heard of churches splitting over less things.
Yeah,
true.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why the subgenius like Cthulhu so much is just because of Lovecraft warped reality. So that make people thought this was actually a being, or like an old religion, and especially the Necronomicon, thinking it was an actual book. I think that was one reason why a lot of people like a lot of subgenius like Lovecraft and adopted Cthulhu.
Or worked again parts of that mythology into their own their own structures, being Lovecraft fans and whatnot.
Yeah, it seems that Sotogiwa would make a good member of the subgenius, since he would be almost like
I would think that he's more a representative of Slack.
Yeah,
Cthulhu is. Cthulhu again more kind of like a malevolent evil entity, while it seemed like Sotogiwa was more again either like in a slacker, slothy type of elder god.
Yeah, he's
he's going to murder you, but he'll take his time.
Yeah, he'll get around to it. Maybe not today. But,
Yeah.
It seemed like he may set something in the way. He may like just move something, just do the least amount of effort, try to kill the person. It's like maybe he would be like some type of slacker, in that video game, sitting around like eating potato chips at like a in a comforter or something like that, recliner. Who knows? And I saw the news today that Spike Lee is planning a Netflix film called Gordon Hemingway in the Realm of Cthulhu.
Yeah.
Did y'all come across? I was wondering.
I read about that as well. Yeah, it does seem a very the timing of it after the popularity of Lovecraft Country does seem a bit, because it's very much what I read about it. It seemed like it was shared a lot of similarities with it, and isn't like based off of any kind of pre-existing source material, something that the original screenplay. So, but we'll see. As far as could be pretty interesting. I'm not familiar with the director, because Spike Lee's not directing it; he's just producing it. And the guy directing it has did a time travel movie for Netflix called "See You Yesterday," but I haven't seen it, so I can't really speak to that as far as knowing anything about the backstory or the filmography of the guy directing it.
I'm guessing it's going to be like some type of Indiana Jones type of an adventure.
It sounded like it, very much so.
Yeah.
Okay. You all must have seen a much more in-depth look at it than I did, because it was just like the thing I saw was just like, oh, we just heard this, and it had just put out a headline. It didn't even have the title.
they must have added more information because I clicked on the link you had sent about it, and they I guess they added more to it because they did give the name.
Maybe so.
And Gordon Hemway, I had to look that up just to make sure it wasn't like some established literary character, but nothing came up, so it's not some obscure literary character that they're using, resurfacing, for this.
Reviving a beloved protagonist of some kind.
Yeah, there's somebody who's been very popular, and I saw they have like a Princess Zinabi of Ethiopia, and who's going to be in, I guess, the love interest in the story. But apparently, she's going to be not quite the damsel in distress. She's going to be kind of like a warrior princess type of thing. So I'm intrigued by it. I think it'd be at least worth to see.
Yeah, definitely, and it's going to be on Netflix, so that's a positive.
Yeah, and all that, and we had all talked about seeing the movie Synchronic, and I think we've all seen it. And so, anybody want to make some comments about it?
I mean, it's got a little element of, I guess, cosmic horror with sort of through time travel, although it doesn't really have so much to do with like elder gods or anything like that. It's more of a sci-fi than a horror, I guess.
I can see, yeah, it does have some cosmic horror elements to it, particularly again when you get into, like you're talking about the time travel pieces of it, because you can become unstuck in time and send into all these four completely unknown places where he kind of doesn't have any idea where he is, and then just kind of gives you that kind of feeling of being insignificant in the vastness of time and space and that kind of thing. I really liked it. It was really good. Their previous movie, The Endless, had a lot of kind of Lovecraftian undertones to it as well, a little more so than this one did. But I really liked it. It was really good.
Yeah. For our listeners out there, Synchronic was a 2019 American science fiction horror film, kind of like a dark science fiction, actually. I don't know if I would really call it a horror film. It stars Anthony Mackie in probably one of his best roles, and Jamie Dornan, who is probably best known as being Christian Grey in 50 Shades of Grey, and playing kind of a different role in this one because Anthony Mackie plays more of the ladies' man in this movie. And they're paramedics who are basically arrive on scenes of really bizarre deaths or injuries to people. And some people have these really strange knife wounds in them. Or one person's been burned. You don't know exactly how they got burned completely. And all they know is it links together some designer's drug called Synchronic. And it did make me think of From Beyond by Lovecraft because of the use of the pineal gland. And how they were stimulating that story to allow people to see different things in reality that we don't normally see. And of course, in this story, it allowed them to time travel, depending where they were sitting or standing, they would end up in different periods. They would travel through time, not through space. So what was going on during that time period where they were would they had to face almost like the dangers that were going on, whether it be a Spanish explorer or some like the native populations or some runaway slaves engaged in some type of obscure religious practices that are going on. And so it's kind of it was I did like the movie. It was quite entertaining. So I thought it definitely is. I definitely would like to see it again sometime. And next subject. You got something to say, David?
No, I was just going to say the ending was a little. I mean, the ending was good, but it was also kind of a downer. So, I mean, it's gotta take the good with the bad.
I was kind of wondering about the ending of whether it was there was it's kind of a little bit vague, where it's almost like people who want a happy ending could have their happy ending with that.
Yeah, he kind of accomplished what he was, that was what he was trying to do. So it's in terms of it versus it being that, he tried and failed, and then
and then for those who don't want to know, we're not going to give any spoilers away about what happened over that, so we won't explore too terribly much on the ending. But it definitely does have a I did like the ending. I thought it was kind of an appropriate way to do it. It wasn't pat or anything like that, and it felt appropriate for the story.
Yeah.
And have y'all seen the trailer for the other movie that have come out called Resonator Miskatonic U? It's supposed to be coming something.
Yes.
I have.
Yeah, and I was what are y'all thoughts on that?
It's like that being supposedly a sequel to From Beyond, but like I think we talked about before, it just seemed like they're following a lot of the same beats of From Beyond. So in terms
it looks like a remake more than a
very
sequel.
much more a remake.
It felt like a prequel reboot or something, for From Beyond.
Well, they're following so many of the same beats of From Beyond, and like trying to figure out unless it's just these are different characters who just so happen to be going through the exact same events that took place in From Beyond.
Yeah, it was almost like they decided like, hey, let's remake From Beyond, but instead of like having being adults, we'll have them as college students, at Miskatonic University, and they're like the wild college students then. Yeah. And so it either has potential being really, really good or really, really bad.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be a middle ground as far as it's going to be. It's going to be very entertaining or very terrible.
Yeah, it's a Charles Band movie, so I do have some reservations about it, but I'll probably still watch it just because of that it looks interesting. And
it does. It's definitely worth a watch, I'm sure.
Yeah, it looks like it'd be but it also I got a sense that maybe this was going to be a pilot to like a film series or something. It's like let's find out what they're going to happen to the kids at Miskatonic U next sequel.
Yeah, I do get that feeling as well, from the way that it's titled, like Miskatonic University : The Resonator or something along those lines, indicating that there will be Miskatonic University, and then something a second installment about a different subject.
Yeah, they'll have the wild cemetery party at Warren's or something like that, and something like that. Or anyway, there was in the news a while ago, there was talk about a new life form found deep beneath the Antarctic, and they said it's breaking all the rules of basically what they determined what life was supposed to be like, and supposed to have found kind of like sponge-like creatures attached to rocks. And so we just say this is proof, that at the Mountains of Madness or John Carpenter's thing is coming true.
I've read the same article that you did as well. As far as they could be going that route, but in terms of what they've learned about them so far, they didn't seem all that malevolent, because they seemed, as far as what they were, kind of stationary, as far as they were just kind of feeding on whatever came to them, versus them kind of coming up out of the darkness and looking for food. That kind of thing. They were existing almost in stasis, without light or heat or that kind of thing. So since they didn't, versus being something that was sealed away and then you've foolishly broken the seal and let them out. That kind of thing.
Right.
So no one's been contaminated yet, and
Right. Yeah. Exactly. They haven't. Haven't broken free and feasted on the researchers yet.
All right. Anyway, we got a few more minutes to talk about Lovecraft. Anybody else want to say anything before we sign off?
I got nothing.
Got nothing.
That's about it.
Okay. Well, then Dan Richard, I guess the stars are no longer right. We must cease all discussions until next month. 30 Minutes of H.P. Lovecraft is sponsored by the new socially distant edition of the Eldritch Horror Game. This podcast was created in association with LovecraftPod.com and the Logan Speculative Fiction Group, with the help of the Logan County Public Library, the Lovecraft Eternal Facebook page, the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast, and the Great Old Ones. Special thanks to Katie Tyson for her technomancy and Joshua Dukes for his skullduggery. Until we meet again, may you avoid the wrath of a homeschooled Princess Cthulhu.
Right.
So, goodbye, everybody. Until next month.
Goodbye.